This is Quinn Coughlin recording Frank Page concerning racial relationships in the South versus in the North. Do I have your permission to record this?
Yes, you do. This is Frank Page, and yes, you do have my permission.
Okay. In your career as a driver, what kind of relationship did you experience between blacks and whites in the South versus in the North growing up?
Okay, well, we'll have to start then in the North growing up. I was born and raised in South Buffalo, and that's where I grew up. And my father at the time, this was in the 40s, I was probably around 10 years old, but he had a repair garage in the lower end of Lackawanna, which Lackawanna was always a melting pot of all nationalities, but basically this was a black and white at that time, and there was never anything unusual that I noticed. Of course, I was very young at the time, but my father had a business that he did business with the blacks and the whites equally. I had an Uncle John that had a supermarket in the lower end of Lackawanna. His was split almost evenly with blacks and whites. And at that time, of course, I was very young, and I really didn't pay attention to it, but I never did notice any big difference. They would come down to my dad's garage, and I knew half of them, and we were always friendly and on friendly terms. And of course, I don't know if that's actually how it was, but that's how I saw it at the time. And, like I say, I didn't pay that much attention to it. Eventually I grew up and wound up in grammar school in South Buffalo, which was, at that point, South Buffalo was totally white. And so I didn't notice anything, different in my life. And wound up in the high school, still pretty much the same. Went to Bishop Timon, and then I went from there to South Park. And there was one or two blacks in the whole of the both schools, and so I didn't really realize a heck of a lot there. But then, as time went by, I wound up into the service, and back in them days there was a draft, but I volunteered and I joined for 3 years, and so at 18 years old, I was in the service. Half our barracks were black, half of them were white. They were integrated. They weren't separate or anything like that I heard about, back in earlier days where they were kept in different barracks and they were segregated. But that was a thing of the past that I knew very little about. And so I didn't particularly, in fact, by the time I was in a regular outfit and wound up there in Anchorage, Alaska, at Fort Richardson. Half our barracks, they came from us right out of the States, the same company. We all got along. I wound up getting a really good job up there, and I wound up teaching skiing for the government up there, which I wasn't involved too much in combat training or the things that we were supposed to be doing, but I enjoyed it. And upon getting discharged, I wound up eventually as an over-the-road driver. And this is where I would like to say, I'm not going to say it was a shock in my life, but it was an awakening that I was not aware of at all. And I wound up as a number one driver so I could pick my runs. And I would go either every Monday morning I would leave for Alabama or Texas, and I would be back home by the weekend and repeat that. And I did this for 25 years, and I noticed things. You get south of the Mason-Dixon line, and you get into Virginia and then down into the Carolinas. Kentucky was not too good, or Tennessee, but once you hit Alabama and Mississippi, that's where my awakening was. And I'll tell you now, I've been retired for about 15 years, but it never changed all the while I drove, and that was for 25 years. They were segregated down there, although they said they weren't. But when you looked at who lived in the tar paper shacks and in the big brick houses, they were segregated. most of their little homes down there in Alabama along Route 17, and I did not like it, but I knew enough about my job and about forced etiquette, I would have to call it. I liked my job, I wanted to keep it, but the children is what bothered me the most. They lived in tar paper shacks, most of them, no running water inside the building, a small stove, and it got plenty cold down there in the winter on a lot of nights. But every day you would see them come out for their school buses, and they would be immaculate. The girls dressed nice, the boys dressed nice, and just looking at the way they lived bothered me a lot. And we had a facility down there where I would go either in Texas or in Alabama, and I would have a load of hazardous waste that I brought down there, and all of the there was no black people in any type of charge of anything. They were always the common laborers, told exactly what and how to do everything they did, and if they didn't agree, they were out of a job. And I remember one day being in the office, and I was getting my paperwork, and there was a confrontation, not a confrontation, it was a one-way talk really, between a white guy from Syracuse, New York, who was a big foreman down there, and I often thought to myself, well, there was a black guy there, and he had a difference of opinion of how to do a job. And he was told in absolute English that if you don't like your job, nigger, I got 500 more in the file cabinet that want it. And that's when I knew that this guy, I didn't like doing business with him. I understood why he was down there, because in Syracuse they wouldn't have put up with that. And it discouraged me because they never had a good opinion. I learned what a real redneck was. They think they got rednecks up here in New York. They ain't got rednecks in New York. If you want to go to see one, a good one, go to Alabama or Mississippi. Mississippi, I only traveled through on my way to Texas. That was the worst of them all. The way they treated the people down there. Now this, I retired in 1997. This was not someplace back out of the Civil War. And nothing was different. It surprised me. I didn't like it. There was not too much I could say about it. And, well, I don't know. You can march with enough of flags and have enough of dissent, but if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're going no place. In fact, you're going backwards. And I understood that. It was, I liked the trip. Half the winter I spent down south in the truck. There was no ice, no snow, and it was a good paying job, and I liked it, and I wanted to keep it. And I don't think I could have made any difference by picking up a flag and joining arms, because there was no fight with these people. They seemed to know where they belonged. I'm talking about the blacks, because they had no choice. And it just discouraged me. And I would talk about it with the other drivers, from my company up here in the north. And I was surprised that they felt the same way I did, most of them. Of course, some of them agreed with it, some of them didn't. That's their own private business. But I thought that this was a different world until I walked down south. And I had to see these people and what they had to put up with just in order to live for another day. And I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. And this is 2014 right now, and February, and I think it was last week or the week before, there was a small article in the paper. 3 guys murdered 2 black people just because they were black. And I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. They did arrest them, but it's amazing that this goes on. The incident in Texas, dragging a man from a pickup truck with a chain until he was dead, and no skin left on them. That is another thing that didn't happen back then. It was only a few years ago. I didn't like it. I didn't like it then. I don't like it now. But race relations in this country, there's a lot of it just hidden under the covers that nobody seems to see or care about. I do. There's nothing I'm going to do about it now. I'm going to be 80 years old, so, where am I? But I'm glad my grandson here asked about this interview, because I want him to know that everybody isn't like him. My grandson is an upstanding man, if I ever saw one in my life, and his two siblings. And they're being taught the right way to live, and I hope they continue that. Because eventually, if everybody would try that, they'd be surprised how well it works. Because you can't beat it if it's teamwork, but if it's not a teamwork deal, it ain't happening. I don't know what else I can say about it, but I talked as I know the truth, that how I see it. I could be off base here, but I don't think I am, because I'm not that stupid anyway. But I want to thank Quinn for asking me to do this little interview, and we'll see how it turns out for him. Thank you.